arrived in Spain barely able to walk. And within 3 days, I had 0 symptoms. 0. I thought I was cured. I wasn't. But what happened taught me something that changed how I understand chronic illness entirely. The travelling started because I was evicted and made homeless from where I was in London. And I still was barely functional. I hadn't discovered mind-body medicine. And I didn't know there were ways you could rewire your brain and release emotions. I thought I had a physical root cause. And so I was very scared of anything that meant I would be overdoing it. But this meant I had no choice. So for many months, when I found out I was being evicted from this apartment in South London, I hunted for another flat. And I would write to people, and I would write very convincing, persuasive emails, and I contacted all of the housing agencies asking for an apartment. And even though people were so nice, they would say, of course, we want to support someone who has had long COVID, and we appreciate we've all just been through an international pandemic together. They would say, but the bottom line for me is I need someone working, and it's for my insurance, and it's this. So I think after about 60 to 80 apartments that I tried to get, I then applied to the council, to the government, to go on the homeless register, so that they will, if you've got any kind of condition, they won't leave you on the street, or so I thought. That did not go well. They were not able to provide anything. There is a 10-year waiting list on that particular council's register. There was no way I was going to have anything. They did offer me the chance to have a bed in a homelessness hostel. But if you've ever visited or spent time in a hostel like that, and I went to visit and I had a look at 2 different hostels that were possible for me. It is very often a place full of drug issues, people who've been living on the street a long time, there's a lot going on, and it's extremely stressful, and you don't have privacy. And so for someone with a chronic condition like I had, it looked terrifying. I cannot tell you how terrified I was at the idea that I would have to be in a homelessness hostel, because I knew my health would decline, and I was already in a wheelchair. And I was already spending, 18 hours of my life every day in bed. So what I decided to do was something I would call an act of desperation. I decided to go to a town that I used to live in Spain, and I hadn't been there for more than 10 years. And I was very, very scared that I wouldn't be able to even get through the airport. But I realized there came a point where I had no choice. I also couldn't pack up my house. I wasn't well enough to put things in boxes, to organize a removal van. So I didn't have a way to keep all the things. So I had to leave it all behind. And at the time, it felt very heartbreaking. I did grab the few things that meant something to me, photographs of relatives who'd passed. I had a little pair of my son's baby shoes, things like that I just kept with me, that I still have with me. And I had a credit card. And what I discovered, which I didn't know in advance, was that after a few nights in this hotel, and it was out of season, so actually per night was only about $10 more per night than my rent had been in that apartment. And they told me at this hotel, they were so lovely, between Malaga and Marbella, this hotel was, they said, out of season, we do a monthly rental, so you could actually pay far less and rent it monthly. And soon enough, it became clear that it was cheaper than my apartment had been in the UK. And when I found this out, it just felt like a really good sign. Like, oh, this is going better than I thought it would. Anyway, let me rewind and tell you how I got through the airport. Of course, I went online and I I ticked the box that said, do you need assistance? Every single airline legally has to offer assistance for you if you have a disability. And at that time, I'd never done it before, so I was very scared. So I was worried, like, how will I prove my disability? Because it's invisible. When you have an invisible chronic disability, nobody can see it. You look fine. I looked okay. And sometimes I would walk along and then sit down in a wheelchair. And because people see you walking, they often think you're faking, or they accuse you of not really needing that wheelchair. I've had that also with parking spaces. If I'd parked in a disability space and then walked into the shop, people run after me and say very horrible things. And I've had to get out my blue badge at that time. I had a blue badge which allows you to park in disability spaces, and which is very difficult to get. You have to prove that you can't walk, or that you can't walk most of the time. So I booked the assistance for the airport, and I got an Uber all the way to the airport. And at the other side, I got an Uber all the way from the airport to the place I was staying. And it felt extremely decadent. I had never done that before. It felt like, who does this? You know, I'm poor. Rich people get taxis. But at the same time, I think the only reason I was doing these things was because I had zero choice. If anyone in the world, and I did ask, I sent out a message on WhatsApp to all of my contacts asking if anyone had a bedroom for me or a bed of any kind. And that was people who I'd known, you know, even slightly over all the previous, 15 years. So I had tried everything and nobody had a bedroom for me at that point. So that's how I did it, door to door, being driven, asking for quiet, of course. I didn't want to spend any energy talking to an Uber driver, which reminds me of something funny. I have quite a bad rating on Uber. I didn't know that Uber drivers could rate you, the passenger. I thought, I'm paying for a service, so surely I would rate the service. I didn't know they could rate us as the customer. But I don't have 5 stars as a customer because, as someone wrote, one of the Uber drivers wrote, rude. And it's funny because if you've ever experienced chronic fatigue, you know that you don't have the energy to talk and you cannot have chats with someone, because that can mean that your symptoms will exacerbate later if you're struggling with a chronic complex syndrome. So from their perspective, I looked fine. I didn't want to chat. They think, oh, she's rude. And they give me this rating. But from my perspective, I'm like, dude, I'm barely alive. I'm just trying to get to a destination and then recover within a few days from this journey. As soon as I arrived in a new place, I felt symptom-free. For about 3 weeks, I had 0 symptoms. And it felt like a miracle. It felt like this strange concept of, does that mean I'm ill in that house in that city, but then I'm not ill if I'm in the countryside near the beach? And I kind of thought, that can't be true. This doesn't make any sense. Now that I know more about nervous system healing, I realize it does make sense, because once you're more regulated, your symptoms do reduce. So whatever feels nourishing to me or to you is going to help those symptoms go down straight away. And for a lot of people, that is simply being somewhere where you can see nature, being somewhere where you get a break from the non-stop activity. Activity might be people in your house, or activity might be that you're on a noisy road, i.e. your window is over a noisy road in a city. Activity doesn't have to be your own activity. It can be everything that's going on around you. Activity might be that you receive a lot of text messages sometimes. That's activity, that's incoming triggers. So if you go somewhere new, and if you put your phone on Do Not Disturb for periods of hours at a time, a few hours here and a few hours there, your nervous system will start to regulate. And it's really, really often that people report an immediate reduction in symptoms. Now, I also didn't know that at the time that I went to Spain. So I arrived and was stunned to feel so much better. And my mood lifted. I felt more optimistic, and that created a positive loop as well. Because it was the beginnings of proof also that it can't really be physical if it can vanish. If I can go to a different place and boom, I feel completely different. Did I leave part of my body behind in the UK? And when I got to Spain, I felt connected. Lots of humans were like, hey, how you doing? You know, in Spanish, hola, ¿qué tal? Hey, how you doing? What are you doing here? We're all doing this. And honestly, even the people who worked in the hotel, the guys who would fix and do the maintenance, the ladies who would be doing the chambermaid service or cleaning, they are a chatty bunch. It's a really strong sense of community. And I think that had a strong effect on me. And there were the natural elements. I put my feet on grass every morning as the first thing I did. I would wake up and wander outside in my pajamas, and it was all grass areas around a big swimming pool, and they had palm trees. So you could walk around barefoot and just feel grounded and feel the nourishment. And there were birds chirping and little squirrels and things running around. It was really picture perfect. So it certainly was a healing retreat for me, and it had a huge effect on the speed of my recovery. I'm not saying that I went to a new place and I was cured and that was the answer, but it certainly was something that helped me get to the next stage of recovery. So it created a supportive foundation for me. So after a few weeks, my symptoms started coming back. And as anyone with a chronic condition may know, that feels so disappointing. We get totally gutted, like, oh, I thought this was finished. I can't believe. And we say, it's come back. But it hasn't come back. It didn't go away. It's simply that it's always up and down until one is really, truly recovered. And when you're truly recovered, you know what your root cause is. You know what was driving those symptoms. And then you realize, oh, it's not going away and coming back. It's wanting to be released. It's coming up so that I can process this. So I would find that I would feel good for periods of time, and then I would get hit by symptoms. And it's a good idea to just prep for that. And all I mean is some frozen food ready to go, and things that you need, and things lined up that are like next to your bed. For me, I had a healing iPad. I had an iPad that was really old, and it just was for meditations. That was all I used it for, and it lived by the bed. And it can be good to leave things prepped for a flare-up while saying, I'm probably not going to get a flare-up. There's no reason for me to get a flare-up because I'm going to keep my recovery rhythm steady, and I'm not going to do loads, and I'm going to look after myself even on airport days. Another thing I would do, travel days through airports or trains or planes. Another thing I would do is I would always wear a baseball cap and sunglasses and earplugs or headphones on travel days. I would do as much as I could to simply cut down all the incoming information, the fluorescent lights, the announcements, the bombardment of visual information. I would just very simply try to reduce it as much as I could so that it's less inundating for the nervous system. I've seen a lot of evidence of people connecting to nature and that leading to the next step in their recovery. And so for some people that might mean getting to their garden. Some people have told me they were carried out to their garden each day, and they lay out on a sun lounger, even if it's horrible weather, and they're connecting to seeing trees, seeing the sky, even watching the rain. Or it's really very helpful, and one could consider it a type of meditation. I also believe that the thing that might have been supporting me even more than nature was love. Because I've heard recovery stories from other people where they didn't change their environment and they didn't travel, but they had a massive step forward when they fell in love with a new partner. Because if I'd just gone somewhere new, like if I'd gone on a package holiday to Turkey, that's the kind of thing they do, like reasonably priced 1 week or 2 week holidays from England. You can fly to these places and stay in a hotel. I don't think it would have had that effect on me. And that's because I had always loved this part of Spain, and I had loved it so much earlier in my life that I had chosen to live there. And I'd had some very happy years living there when my son was little. So it felt like a good, appealing place to go that was already in my heart. So if there's a place that you think, oh, I always loved it there, or I went for a weekend there, or I went on a holiday there at some time in the past and I loved it and I didn't want to leave, then I would say that's kind of a really good indicator of a place to consider. For me, it turned out that I'd gone somewhere in desperation, and then I realised I don't have a home to go back to. So in that hotel, they offered those monthly rates out of season. And eventually, we came back to the time of year where they come into season and their prices went up, not double, but times 4. So it went from something like under $1,000 a month to over $4,500 a month. Actually more, I think it makes $6,000. So that was impossible for me. And I had to go. So then it becomes, where shall I go? What will I do next? And instead of it feeling now like this terrifying thing, it felt exciting. And so for me, since I was evicted and made homeless, I'm technically still homeless, but I would say I'm glamorously homeless because I go on to the next place. And then if that one, whether it's huge weather changes or prices skyrocketing or something that happens after a few months, then it's time to go on to the next place. And it becomes this slow traveling, gentle exploration of the world, which feels nourishing, which is life-changing.